This episode of Living Corporate is brought to you by Blind. Blind is a trusted community of more than 5 million verified professionals. On Blind, professionals connect and have honest discussions about salaries and what it's really like to work at or interview with a company. You can also join your private company channel to have a candid and safe conversation with your coworkers about what's really going on. And because it's anonymous, you can be honest and trust what you read. Check out teamblind.com to get the latest insights and the answers to your workplace questions.
This is Including You, the new series from Lead at Any Level. Including You features stories from chief diversity officers and other executives who are creating inclusive cultures in their organizations. Our goal is to show what's working in companies just like yours, to give you the tools you need to keep pushing for progress in your own workplace. We want to create belonging and opportunity for everyone, including you. And now here's your host, Amy C. Waninger.
Welcome to Including You. I'm Amy C. Waninger. My guest today is Jorge Quezada. Jorge Quezada, him, is the Vice President of People and Culture for Granite Construction, one of the largest full-service general contractors, construction management firms, and construction materials producers in the U.S. The 100-year-old company employs thousands of tradespeople and professionals across the country, and Jorge is definitely paving new ground in this space. Jorge, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the invitation to participate in your podcast. I've been a fan. I've been watching their work. And so I was really thrilled for the invitation.
Well, thank you. And I'll just say turnabout's fair play because I was a guest on your podcast a few months ago. Mm-hmm. And I finally have an opportunity to bring you into this one. So I was really excited to launch something new that I could include you in.
It is inclusion, right? Yes, nice. Yep.
So I am curious, we don't think about the construction industry a lot of times as being on the forefront of diversity and inclusion. And I'm wondering why D&I for this industry, and then why D&I for Granite Construction specifically? Mm-hmm. What does the company hope to accomplish with their initiatives?
Oh, I love that question. And let me take you through a framework of talking of self and then others and then beyond, right? So within, I would tell you that in your question, the reason why I think people don't think of the construction industry in the forefront when it comes to D&I has to do with our own biases. And I'll tell you a personal story. When my son was, 5 and my daughter was 2, we had a chance. We were in Colorado and we were going to go on the Halloween parade. And I dressed my son as Bob the Builder very quickly and my daughter as Minnie Mouse. And I give you that story because I never thought of my daughter ever being in construction. I never had any, why would I think of that, right? Because of my own perceptions. My son very quickly, even the show, Bob the Builder, right? There was no women characters in the show until later that I believe Wendy the Builder came up. But anyway, so I give you that story because I think we all have grown up dads, or friends that have been in the construction industry and then been male figures. So that has left an imprint in our minds that, diversity is not a thing in the construction industry. It's only for men. But then when you come into the industry, you realize there are some amazing women, like blazing incredible trails, both in the operation side, like on roads, building things, and on the back end, in the administrative staff type roles, meaning in accounting, in the controller's department, in finance departments, and human resources. So the construction industry can't function without diversity, right? So that's the second part of it. Finally, and to answer the specifics of your question, I think from a workforce development perspective, the industry is in high demand, especially after the infrastructure bill that was passed. We as a country have decided and made the decision to, just take care of the roads, to strengthen the bridges, and to really think about what is it about infrastructure that needs improvement or that we need to build. And so there's a high demand, but the supply for talent hasn't kept up with the demand. And so we as an industry have to be very, very clinical about going to different talent pools that in the past we never went to. So bringing in more women, bringing in more people of color that may have not been introduced to the industry because of the traditional approaches to recruitment. And so when you bring that type of diversity in, you have to be aware of the environment now that you're creating and the conversations that you're going to be involved in, the things you need to consider. For instance, if you bring in more women into the industry and your benefits are not current to the benefit structures that are available to women in other industries, you may be bringing women in and come to find out that they leave because the benefits don't support them staying. If you bring in, a woman who wants to start a family and the benefits are not conducive for having a family, then she is going to look elsewhere. So that's just one example that I think is critical that we consider. So then the final thing, when you talk about Granite, we're celebrating 100 years. And there's a reason why we're celebrating 100 years and why we've been a company for that long. And it's because along the way, we have seen, the trends, we have noticed the things that we needed to shift to, the things that we've learned how to unlearn and relearn new ways of doing things, right? So, we take great pride in our safety initiatives. We take great pride in our core values. And now, and inclusion is one of our core values. We really stepped back and said, in order for us to be around the next 100 years, not only are we going to have a diverse portfolio of products, right, that we provide our clients, but we're going to have a diverse workforce that we have to be able to have the right environment where people feel like they belong, that people feel like they're included, that people feel like their voices are heard, that they know that they can make a difference. So it's being intentional with the focus on having impact on our workforce.
And so how do you do that in construction? Because, we're hearing a lot broadly about how hard it is to manage culture when people are remote. And in a construction environment, a lot of your workforce is on a job site, right? They're not in the office, obviously, or they can build the roads and the bridges and the buildings and the things. And so how do you encourage, or how do you reinforce your values when your workforce is so distributed and people are not maybe always working on the same teams? And, I would think just logistically from a culture standpoint, there's a lot to manage there.
So there is, and I think that is another reason why diversity needs to be understood, that it's broader than gender and ethnicity, because the diversity that you just walked through a bunch of diversity, right? And we have to be able to acknowledge it. So let's take, coming back to the workplace or working from home, working hybrid, and that whole concept. Our industry is so diverse how we work, how we execute work, that you need to be nimble, flexible, have the dexterity or agility to move left or right, depending on weather, depending on a grade, right? So we have a certain skill set that allows us to look at a problem and to come up with a solution. So when you said, some people working from home, we had no choice. In order to keep working, we had crews on roads, right? We had crews working that we could not have them work from home, or that work was not going to get done. At the same time, we had people in offices that, because of regulations from a state or municipality or whatever, we were challenged to have them work from home. So we had this hybrid approach very quickly. Some companies did not have to deal with actual people coming into work. So all of a sudden, what we had to do is we had to take a look at, and so let me ground you on something. Like, we take great pride on our values, right? So when we talk about safety, integrity, excellence, sustainability, and inclusion, we needed to find out if this pandemic was going to continue longer, how is it going to be sustainable working in this type of model? So we had to step back and evaluate who can work from home, who couldn't, and then work through those conversations. Now, it's in that conversation that people come up with, well, why can't I work from home? And why do they work from home? And so we've dealt with those discussions. And if we didn't have, I would tell you, the inclusive diversity practice that we have in today, I don't know if we would have been equipped to have those conversations the way they needed to happen. And I'll tell you that the last 2 years have really taught us a lot. Has taught us that, workplace culture is different today than it was in 2019. And for people to say that it isn't, that we're going to make it the same, I think they're reading different books and they're not seeing the tea leaves. And so what you have to do is you have to be able to have the dexterity, agility to pivot as needed in this environment. So in your question for me, I think we have been equipped, not because, yes, because of inclusive diversity, but because just the innate nature of our work, when we're told, hey, we need to build this bridge, like the people that hired us don't know how to build it. So we know how to solve problems. And I think that that's something that the industry should take great pride in. We know how to solve some major hairy issues, right? When it comes to construction. So using the same methodology, we could step back and evaluate what things do we need to solve for here and take the same approach to get the same results, right? The success. So that's how I would answer your question. I think we need to give ourselves a little bit more credit, number one. But number two, we have to have those conversations to be able to hear different perspectives.
Yeah, and you brought up so much in that, and I want to go back to this problem solving notion, because you mentioned workforce development in the why for the construction industry. Why is diversity and inclusion important? I think that a lot of industries are struggling to find qualified people. They're struggling to find that talent pipeline coming into their industries. And I know you and I have talked in the past about how the trades were overlooked for so many decades as a path to a good middle-class job, for, years, right? The dominant narrative was you have to go to college, you have to, be an engineer, you have to be, right? All of these different kind of white collar jobs was kind of the definition of success in America for a long time. And I know that there's a shortage now because of that, and probably because of some other factors as well, but largely because of that narrative, that there's been a shortage in the trades of skilled workers. There's fewer people going into apprenticeship programs, that sort of thing. Can you talk about what Granite's doing to shore up the trades as a viable career path for young people, and how you're building that workforce of the future to have that pipeline coming in?
Yeah, so I think the best way of answering it is there's short-term, mid-term, and long-term type of strategies that we're thinking through. I think on the short term, what you do is you strengthen the relationships, strategic relationships you have with unions, trade associations, junior college systems, and organizations that feed, talent into a talent pipeline, right? Short term. In the middle term, what you need to do is you need to strengthen the things that have worked in the past. And that is, you have to have conversations with people at younger ages to let them know the value of career of construction. But an individual company like Granite could, with 6,000 employees, we could visit 6,000 high schools, right? Today, if we wanted to. But the reality is that there's more high schools, there's more schools, right? More great middle schools and grade schools than we are as a company. So as an industry, we're strengthening our position in the sense of convening and having other companies like work with us to do that, because this is an industry solve that we have to do. And ultimately, long-term, we have to step back and build the strategies that are necessary to build pipelines and talent pools outside of the normal partnerships that we have and the normal convening that we do as an industry, meaning that we have to consider apprenticeship programs specifically for Granite. How do we educate in the communities where we live and work? How do we expose people to things, to jobs like ours with degrees or no degrees, and be very intentional about having an impact with that. That's like high level, short, midterm, high term, long term. The thing that I think is fascinating is that we also have to step back as an industry and realize that I don't know where the shift happened, Amy, and maybe there's some research out there that you can help me with, but there came a time when, there were schools in New York, Texas, LA, California, where we were teaching classes and people could get certified to be plumbers, to be, work into the trades. And then we stopped doing that. And we said, 4-year degree is the way to go. And I think what we're finding out is that process with some people just did not connect. So you have people leaving after their freshman, sophomore year that maybe should have gone into the trades, maybe should have gone into. So, how do we as a society also put value on the people that can work with their hands and give them the flowers that they deserve, right? Because we have an amazing opportunity for people coming out of high school to build an incredible career, incredible life, be able to buy a home, send their kids, whatever schools that they wanted. We have people that have done really good being in this industry. So we as a society have to value, right, people that are fixing our roads, building our bridges and our tunnels and so forth.
We've seen in the last couple of years what happens when those things don't work anymore, right? When that link is taken out. We've seen supply chain problems. We've seen, the very famous collapse of a building in a condominium in Florida. Right? We've seen bridges that are collapsing. There's a lot that we've seen that we've neglected for so long that now, right, we're at this critical point. And I think that, I think the value, it's one of those things, like, I know a lot of people that work in IT, right? They run the server room. And if everything's going well, kind of the adage is, well, if everything's going well, what am I paying you for? And then if anything breaks, well, what am I paying you for? Right. And I think our infrastructure is kind of in that same boat, right? We don't notice it until something goes wrong. And then we wonder, well, where is everyone? And they've been neglected for far too long.
Yeah, you don't have, sorry for the interruption, but what you just brought up is a bridge doesn't have technically check engine light like we do in our cars. And the people that will tell you that work on cars, if you're taking your car in when the check engine light goes on, you've actually made it worse, right? Like, you should be, the maintenance of your vehicle should be done before those lights, so those things go on, because by the time they go on, you've let it go further than it needs to. And I think that's what resonates for me when you say that. Like, I think the bridge was built, let's keep going down that path. And we said, oh, it gets us from point A to point B. Don't need to worry about that anymore. And so because we don't have to worry about that anymore, we don't have to upkeep it. We don't need the staff to check it. We don't need to do all this stuff. Or we go from 100 inspectors down to 5, and they can't inspect all the bridges on an annual basis. That's one way of thinking through it. But then when you see a crack and you report it, it's only a crack. The cars can still go through it. I don't know how many cracks you need on a bridge before you have to repair it. And that's not my expertise. But I can tell you that that's what I think what we've lost is that support mechanism. And now we have the opportunity to make it right.
Absolutely. And to do that, you need more people than you currently have, and you need different people than you've historically had.
Yes.
What kind of messaging are you putting behind come join us in the construction industry, especially to people who maybe have been excluded from it or felt excluded from it in the past, or they think, yeah, I could work there, but it's going to be a low wage job and there's no path forward for me? Because I know that historically, a lot of hands-on work has not led to career advancement for people who have been historically excluded.
Yeah, so I really like the way you asked that question, because it goes back to an initial thought that you put out, and that is that there's not a lot of qualified people. And I would tell you that I've been in human resources for the majority of my career, and there's always qualified people. It's who you're not letting in is the issue. So let me say that again. The issue is that there's not qualified people. The issue is who you're letting in. And sometimes who you're letting in has to do, there's only certain staff numbers that you can bring in, right? So if your capacity to hire is only to bring, to have a company of 10,000 people and you can't handle 20, 30, 40, 50,000, that's legit, right? You can only staff to what you can work on. At the same time, so to answer your question, we have been pretty consistent of going to places that other companies don't go, because we've realized very quickly that if everyone's fishing in the same pond, the opportunity for you to get a lot of fish narrows. So we challenge ourselves to identify new talent pools, go to different schools that traditionally we have not gone to. And then we're pretty transparent of the opportunity, not only of the positions that are available, but the income that could be made. We don't have, that's part of integrity, right? I think you can't hide your cards. And now states are literally forcing companies to put out ranges of what people could make. So, now what we used to be an advantage for us of this transparency right now, it's an unequal playing field almost in certain areas. But to answer your question, it doesn't feel like we're not doing anything new. We're just continuing doing what we've done to have greater impact. So, there are places in the country that we are not have a regional office, and that's by strategy. But we also think about, can we go into those marketplaces and recruit and bring in talent that we haven't had in the past? The thing that you have to be real mindful is that you can't take someone from Jackson, Mississippi, and to be very specific, drop them in Everett, Washington, if the community in, let's say, in a certain city cannot sustain a certain community. So if the social life, the social awareness is not there, the church infrastructure is not there, just issues like hair, taking care of hair. If you don't have barbers, beauty shops that can take care of a culture, then those people, you're going to bring them in, but they're going to leave. So you have to be really mindful. So I think, to build on, to answering your question, those are the things that we're considering that maybe in the past we wouldn't have noticed or understood that needed to be thought of.
That is so important. And I think I know a friend of mine that works with the local Economic Development Commission. She lives in Iowa, and she does a lot of work around that, around how do you create a community that will not churn through the workers that the local employers bring in, right? They don't have enough folks locally because it's a pretty rural community. And so then when they bring folks in, they don't stay, because even though they've got a great job and they love their employer, the community rejects them. Think about an organ transplant. It's almost like that kind of a thing, right?
You got to get the body ready, or in a transplant, to your example, because Leo Tucker at Northwestern Mutual uses a similar analogy. He says, we got to get the body ready to accept the organ, because if you don't get the body ready, the body will reject it. And sometimes the organ will reject the body too. So let's be mindful of that, right? And on a personal note, I'm here in the United States because in 1968 or so, my father won a lottery to get a green card. And it happened, our port of entry was New Orleans. And what was happening in New Orleans at the time, the service industry needed people. And so they went to Central America. And so they brought some people from Central America in, but they were going back, not a lot of Jorges in New Orleans in 1969, right? And so they realized, wait a minute, time out. We should build community for these folks that we're bringing in. So my dad was a musician, and so he was part of that building of the community. And so that's why I'm here. So, just like I said, that the industry has the ability to solve, so do we as a country. Right? We have the ability to solve. We just have to pause and really think through it. Like, what would we need? So, yeah.
And nobody wants to live somewhere that they don't feel safe. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to live somewhere where they have to drive, you know, hours to get the products that they need or the foods that they need that are culturally appropriate or a church where they feel like they belong.
Mhm.
And so it absolutely makes sense to me that employers would want to be mindful of that so they're not paying relocation costs and then, and training people and then losing them because of the community.
Well, and that's what gets lost when we're very intentional in our practice, right? When we say, well, that's a privilege that a person has in a certain city, not to be thinking about that stuff, right? And then all of a sudden the word privilege takes a whole different meaning to people, right? Because you could be in a community that you haven't grown up with the silver spoon in your mouth, that you had to work really hard. And if you identify the word privilege that way, you don't get to see, you're looking at things, but you don't see the issue that we're talking about right here, right? So someone's privilege of not having to worry about having curly hair, right? That the only way that you think about curly hair is if you actually go get a perm, right? Or there's certain products that certain communities need or thrive with that you may not think about it, but that is also the thing that when we mean privilege, the thing that you don't think about, right? Or there's an advantage that church is another example, right? If you have a church and I go to a certain church, a certain denomination, and that church is not around, I don't feel like you said, that I belong in this community. So those are the kinds of things that we think about on when we go in to a job site or opening up an office that we consider.
Jorge, this has been such an amazing conversation, and I think you've given us a lot of insights into what Granite's doing and how the construction industry is responding to some of these, number one, market pressures, but also talent pressures in terms of diversity and inclusion. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers and our listeners about what it is that you're doing that you feel like is really working, that's really making a difference?
I pause because I think there's a lot to synthesize, but but knowing that we only have a couple minutes to close, I would tell you that I feel like my job is to create clarity when
you're building a culture of belonging, every word counts. That's why Textio brings the world's most advanced language insights into your hiring and employer brand content. Our industry-leading approach to artificial intelligence and machine learning provides the tools needed to find more diverse candidates. In short, Textio builds more equitable workspaces, guiding businesses and writing more inclusive job posts. And we're building on that success by bringing even more products to the market for all people who share our belief that language matters. Words have power, and at Textio, we harness that power to increase the access and availability of value-driven work for everyone.